Hey guys, welcome back to Unleashed. We are so glad you are here, and remember that we are the resistance. You know, what has it been, like about a week since Thanksgiving or something? And Eric, you and I had talked about our Thanksgiving last time. I just got a question for you. Are you still eating leftovers?
Oh, yeah.
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 Like ham, turkey, corn casserole, stuffing.
All of it.
Yeah, pretty much.
We're getting towards the end, though.
Yeah, well, you know what I start doing when you get toward the end? Because you only have a little bit of this, but a lot of that. I just do like that shepherd's pie, man. I just begin to just kind of mix it all together, and
yeah,
it works.
There you go.
Well, we got a question today.
I've got a question. Do you want to say, do you know who this is from? Because you didn't include it.
His name is Josh from Indiana.
Josh from Indiana wants to know, why do men fall off after being so blessed by God, and then they return to the old habits?
Yeah, boy, isn't that a big question? I think we've all, hit that wall sometimes. I always say it's kind of like, there's those neural pathways that we have that we begin to form, in our life. And a lot of times when guys find Christ or whatever in their life, those habits have been going on for a long time. And so they can be really fired up, and they can see, they got the revelation, the aha moment. They want to do life differently. But those old neural pathways, it's kind of like credit card debt. It took you a long time to get into that debt. It's going to take you a while to get out of it. And a lot of times the reason that we keep going back to those things is because we're getting something out of those old behaviors. I made a post like the other day on Facebook. I don't know if you saw it, but it basically was kind of around this. It's whenever you continue to entertain unhealthy thoughts in your brain, it's going to take a while to get that stuff untangled. And it takes a lot of hard work. But man, and we talked about this, I think, on last week's episode. And we were talking about when I don't feel good enough. And we keep entertaining that thought. When a guy doesn't understand where his one true identity in Christ comes from, he begins to not feel good enough. Right. He doesn't feel significant, and he begins to go to things like porn or money or hunting. We'll talk some about that today. But, and I think it's very true. I think that we return to those old habits, and it takes encouragement. It takes our brothers, to say, hey, man, that's not the real you. What's going on? You okay? So
sure. Yeah.
Well, man, I'm pumped about today's guest. And without further ado, Terry Peer, welcome, man. It's good to have you here.
Man, thanks for having me. It's an honor, and I'm humbled to be on such a show where you've had big name people, and I don't feel like I fit in very well, but I appreciate you having me.
Man, I was watching you today on two things, on Chasing Giants and on the Sunday Night Prayer video. Tell first of all, before I kind of get rolling into that stuff, with Real World Wildlife Products, you've been the marketing director for how long?
Oh my goodness. Don asked me to work 3 months to rebrand the company 7 years ago.
I was thinking it was like 2015 or something.
Yeah, so they wanted to rebrand the company when they came out with the nutrition products. And with my marketing background and business consulting side, we've been friends for a long time. So he asked if I would help. We said it would be about a 3-month project, probably 7-8 years ago. So it's been a ride ever since.
And we're going to talk
blessed.
And we're going to talk about your ride, because I know that there's been some recent stuff that, some really cool stuff, and I can't wait to hear about that. I was watching the video.
But Real World is actually where we got to know each other. I want to first start off by saying, on behalf of all of Real World, we took a very different approach with our marketing and outreach, and really tried to make it to where we partnered with true faith-based people. And that's actually how we got connected. Yep. You and I know you'd met Don several years ago, but we took a little bit of different approach with your ministry and obviously this platform. So it's humbling to know that there's people like that out there, like you, that are using your platform, your connections, and obviously your life to minister to others. And it's a humble to be able to take a business opportunity and say, hey, we want to go support you with it. That's the cool part for me to do.
It's been a blessing to be connected with you guys. And I was watching you. I was just kind of scrolling. I'm always, checking in with Chasing Giants and see what new episodes or what's going on. And there was one where you were speaking for a game dinner, and you were talking about Don Higgins. That's who we're talking about when we say Don. And you were like, you said something about you kind of feel like, I don't want your expectations to be too high tonight. Do you remember that?
Not specifically, no.
It was kind of funny.
When you were watching.
It was.
Yeah.
I don't even remember what the episode was, and you were speaking for a game dinner because you were saying something about Don. Maybe you were expecting, and I'm like, no, don't sell yourself short. I mean, Don's got you there.
Well, the funny thing is my role, even in the outdoor industry for the last 18 years, has always been pretty much behind the scenes, developing plans, business plans, brands, and organizational leadership activities. So that's how I first met Don, actually, was way back in the day, probably 18, 19 years ago, through the outdoor industry. So when he approached me about doing the Chasing Giants podcast, that was the first time that really I was in the forefront, and it's still, to be honest with you, very uncomfortable for me. But I just feel like in a lot of ways, God challenges you maybe in ways that you're not real comfortable with, kind of out of your element, if it's truly going to be a ministry. And when Don committed, just like with Real World, that the Chasing Giants podcast was going to be used as a way to, at the end, win lost deer hunters, it's really hard to say no to an opportunity where you feel called that God's going to let you use it as a witness tool.
Yeah. I first met Don, I'm trying to remember, he had just come out with, I think, what was it, Hunting Whitetails in the Real World? And
his first book.
Yeah, and I interviewed him. Matter of fact, I was in my garage. This is really crazy. I was in my garage today changing cat litter, which you have to do when you have hunting equipment in there. You're going to pay a price. But I had interviewed him, and I had made it into a book as well. And I had one of my interviews with him in there. It was called, I don't have it out, so this isn't a marketing thing here. It was Hunting Whitetails, the World's Greatest Whitetail Hunters' Secrets Revealed. And then you guys came out with Chasing Giants. And guys, if you have not listened to that podcast, you need to. If you want to become like a monster deer hunter, I mean, really, just having all the knowledge of everything you'll ever need, you'll get it right there. I mean, it's a one-stop shop, and it's wonderful because there's no price you're paying for it. Log on, find that podcast, and
the great thing about podcasts, and like your podcast that you have, that I try to listen to every episode as soon as they come out. Everybody kind of has their own feel and kind of style, right? You bring guests on and interview and pick their brain, using hunting or fishing or whatever is, the common thread to minister. Don and I are completely opposite. We rarely have guests on, and the whole premise of it is if you want to learn about shooting a basketball, you watch Steph Curry, right?
Right.
So with deer hunting, there's very few individuals that are consistently doing what Don is doing on small acreage tracts of private land that are managed for habitat, but also going and doing it on permission properties. And so having the Steph Curry of NBA, for the deer hunting world, that's really the nugget. And, my role in the whole thing is very insignificant. Basically I'm just there to keep dialogue going and occasionally push some buttons, because we all know Don is a little outspoken with his political beliefs. And, when we see an episode getting a little stale, I'll push a button here every once in a while and let him go on one of his famous rants. But,
okay, so
just having him as part of the show, that's really the draw. You're really learning from one of the guys who learns what is different about a mature buck when they get 5 years and old. They're just different. And what is he doing year round? Every single day of the year, he's doing something for deer. And just following him through it, that's really what the podcast is about.
When I had Don on here a couple months ago, I said, I had asked you, I said, hey, is there anything that we could kind of tease him with? I mean, I know how much he hates expandable broadheads, so that's always going to be a fun thing. But you said, yeah, just say, I hear you love to wear shorts. He knew exactly who I would talk.
I don't think that man's legs have seen the light of day in probably 58 years. He was probably 3 years old in an Easter photo outside his grandparents' church the last time those legs saw the light of day.
So I reached out to Don and I said, hey, what can I say about Terry? Terry gave me ammunition, and he said, just say how much I really liked Terry the first time we met.
Oh man. Our history, that's a true testament to how God can use people from different backgrounds for something a whole lot bigger if you let him. Our relationship has not always been the best, but I tell you what, he's one of my dearest friends now that I would trust him with anything. And even though over the years we've had our ups and downs, just such a loyal and devout friend.
Yeah,
I'm very, very thankful for him.
And I think that's the way friendships are. If we really are iron sharpening iron and helping each other grow, we're not always going to see eye to eye. And I think having a teachable spirit, in true friendships is so important. What was I? I was watching. I hadn't had a chance to see. Is it The Legacy of Babe? Is that the name of it?
Yeah, Don's new video that just came out Thanksgiving Day.
Yeah, watch it, guys.
About his daughter with breast cancer and him on this deer. We had high aspirations for Babe. That this was going to be just a crazy story of another just 200-inch deer, but we've talked about it on the podcast. We really believe that the drought and lack of nutritional value that was out there really hurt the antler growth in mature bucks through the summer of 2023. And we just did not see the antler growth. And in fact, some of the deer that we talk about on the podcast actually went down, but how quickly the narrative changed of the story of potentially a buck we thought had potential to go 200 to really being a family first setting priority. And God uses things in ways we just can't even understand. And what started as maybe a potential another 200-inch deer turned into such more of a tool to use for ministry and outreach and encouragement to the hunting community. So obviously we don't wish anything bad on his daughter, and feel like we're using her. But the story of how Don has kind of navigated this year with the trials and tribulations to make it really a story about family and faith is pretty special. I hope everyone goes out to the Chasing Giants with Higgins Outdoors YouTube channel and watches this video. It's 20 minutes. I believe the hunt footage and the story of the deer probably takes up 3 minutes of that.
Yep.
But such a special story for Don and his
family.
I'm so proud
I sat there and got all teared up when I was watching it.
Yeah, we recorded our podcast episode on Saturday night this week, and Don and I talked about it on air. And I did okay. Because I pretty much knew the narrative. I'd seen some of the B-roll footage of Andrea, in the hospital. But what really got me choked up is when they were standing behind the SUV going into chemo treatment. Yeah. And she said, "I feel pretty good. That's why I don't want to go in."
Yeah.
And Corey, her husband, man, you talk about an awesome guy, Don's son-in-law. He just said, "I love you." And I get choked up now thinking about it because, my wife was diagnosed with cancer back almost 20 years ago. And those emotions and feelings of helplessness as a man, when your children, your wife, your, a family member is going through that sickness and all you have to turn to is your faith and trust in God. That was really emotional for me to sit there and watch it. And I haven't been brave enough to watch it with my wife. We're going to sit and watch it together, but I haven't been brave enough to do that because I know I'll be even more of a basket case because we've gone through the same thing that Corey and Andrea have gone through.
And when she got out of the back of the SUV or the van, it was to go in, and I saw, of course, her hair is real short from the chemo and everything, and it just brought back memories. When both my parents had cancer, they're both gone now, but when my dad, had it for the first time, I went all the way back from Indiana to Pennsylvania to meet my dad to go deer hunting. And it was going to be the first day of buck. And the night before, my dad had to go in the hospital. They had found some blood and stuff in his urine. And so the next morning, they had put him in the hospital. And so he says, you go. I know how much this means to you. I said, you mean more to me than hunting. He said, you go. Well, I changed everything around that day, shot a smaller buck than I would have normally taken. And because I wanted the meat to take home. And I was first thing in the morning. I was back home by 8:30. And I took it off. My buddy, he found out about my dad. He goes, you bring that deer to my house. I'll go ahead and butcher that for you. You go spend time with your dad. And that time with my dad, I don't know if I've ever really shared this, but when I went to go see my dad, in that moment, you don't know. You don't know what the future holds. But the memories that my dad and I had from deer hunting were the best memories I had. Just the conversations, everything you do when you're out there. And there was an elderly man in the bed next to him. And his son, who was probably in his mid to late 50s, was there. And at one point, I saw them kind of draw the curtain. But where I was sitting at the foot of the bed, I could kind of see. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop. I could see it. And this man was dying. It was in his last few days. And his, 50-some-year-old son crawled up in the bed beside him and just held his dad.
Yeah.
It's in those moments you don't think about, being a tough guy, looking a certain way, I'm going to handle this well. Everything in life comes down. And this is something really interesting. Bill Gaither told me one time, he said, Brent, there's only 2 times in life that we really, it's the most important time in our life. One is at the birth of a new life, and the other one is the passing of a loved one. And I was thinking, we're praying for Dawn's daughter that she's going to, fully recover from this. I don't know where things are with that. We're praying for her. My wife and I are, but I do know that they just had a new baby too. So he had the whole plethora of emotions happening at the same time.
Yeah, his one daughter had a baby, I think, right on top of the beginning stages of his oldest daughter, fighting cancer. So both sides of the spectrum with Don and Robin right now. But, I think everyone is in just such a good place, trusting. And for the listeners of your show or Chasing Giants, we're on the opposite end of this and can see the anxiety or the fear. I'm not saying it doesn't go away, but knowing that so many people are praying and knowing so many people care and so many people are sending messages, that rallying of the believers of this body, if nothing else, comes from a deer hunting podcast, and that is to unite people together when they need it. How much of a blessing is that to be part of it? I mean, that's just so huge. And, not only do we appreciate what you do with this platform, but we want the Chasing Giants, community to also be really centered around that support network as almost a family of just a bunch of deer hunters coming together to do something good,
And I don't want to call it a challenge, but maybe an invitation to those guys out there that have your hunting buddies that you see during hunting season and that's about it. Or maybe you message back and forth about, pictures you got. I just want to invite you guys to go a little bit deeper with each other because there's that bond. You guys have the same passions, and if you have that love for God, and just show up because any day can change just instantly it can change.
Well, my life, especially in the last 5 years, is just a testament to that exact thing. And, I don't even know if you know the whole story about this, but very early in the stages of Chasing Giants, we only had probably 6,000 listeners a week. We weren't near as big as what we are now. And there was this situation that my daughter came home from college. The Georgetown College softball team was trying to do this fundraiser for a family in the peak of COVID. Everything shut down. There was this family from Elizabethtown, Kentucky, that had 2 little girls that had leukemia at the same time. I mean, I can't imagine one child being sick, but 2 little girls at the same time with a newborn. So they were having to rent a house in Cincinnati to get treatment at Cincinnati Children's. And, my heart was just broken for this family. And these college softball players at Georgetown were trying to figure out a way to raise enough money to pay the rent on the house. And it was one of those things. Hey, we're going to mention this on the podcast, if nothing else, to ask for prayer, right? Well, all of a sudden, this outpouring of our listeners started contacting us and said, "How can we help?" And we were like, "We don't know. we wanted." So I went to my church eldership and said, "Hey, we got this 911 situation. Is there any way that if someone wants to give to this family, we can set up a benevolence fund at the church and people can donate to the church and then the church can, take care of the family." And they were 100% on board. Within a matter of I think 3.5 weeks, we paid for their house payment back home, their farm payment, and the rental house for the rest of the year. And this was in February, with this outpouring of people from the community. And that's really the beginning stages, the initial thing that Don and I prayed about and said, God, use this for something bigger. And that's the origin of the Lester's Foundation, which was named after my grandfather, to where we help families with sick kids while they're having to take a leave of absence or lose their job to focus on that family.
Say the name of that again. There was a glitch in your vocal there. The Lester, say it again.
Lester's feet. So the short story is my grandfather, Lester Schickel, was the first person to ever take me hunting. And he was my childhood hero. And he was a true servant leader. He actually didn't become a Christian until late in life, but he wore size 15 shoes. Whoa. And he was a war veteran in World War II. He was a Major League Baseball pitcher. He was a cop. He was a farmer. So as a little kid, the only thing he didn't check off was an astronaut as your childhood hero. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I grew up always wanting to find a way to follow the footsteps of my grandfather. So we felt that when we named this foundation to assist families, all just part of a conversation we had on a hunting podcast, I just felt led to call it Lester's Feet, just in honor of my grandfather. But it's amazing. I mean, we could talk for 2 hours just about how God used the podcast to help as many families as we are, but we roll over, it's 100% volunteer organization. No administrative costs come out. We pay bills directly on behalf of families, so we don't hand families cash. That's how we're fiscally responsible to the donors. But we'll run over $1 million a year through that foundation, just helping families who are unable to work or there's a loss of income as it relates to the care of a child that's either getting treatment or recovering from an illness.
I'll never forget when you and I had our first conversation about possible sponsorship when I was going to be doing some stuff, try to promote, real world and the stuff you were doing. You said, you know what, that's secondary to us. You said Lester's Feet's really important. We want to see people be helped that are really on that 911, as you called it. And that was your main concern, was just really making sure that we were going to be helping people.
Yep.
Love that.
So it's just a huge blessing. Matt McPherson, who has been, he's you know him Matthews. Probably better from the music industry than we do from the hunting industry. But, he told Don a long time ago, to whom much is given, much is required. And obviously we don't have a whole lot. We just have a little hunting podcast that, is usually only in the top 20 in the outdoor category on iTunes. But, God gives us such an opportunity to kind of rally people around each other and be there when we need it. And it's humbling to know that many people, kind of have our back and not only want to follow the podcast and learn about deer hunting. We hope people learn and get something out of it. But the fact that people will, they trust us enough to say, okay, we want to help someplace, but we know that some of these nonprofits are just not managed the way that we're not sure where our dollars go to. And they trust the board of directors that's behind this, where there's assurance that not only does every dollar that comes in go back out to a family, but that also we vet the situations out properly and then pay those bills directly, so the money's not, used somewhere where it shouldn't. So that whole ordeal from the beginning has been just an eye-opening about truly what being a servant is. I've been spending a lot of time just really thinking about, Matthew chapter 20, verse 26, where, it really talks about those who want to be great have to be a servant. And, I really like the ESV version because that verse 27 really hits home, because us competitive guys, it's not about being good. It's about being first sometimes. We're so competitive. I think the word first is such a cool word to use in that translation, is that, whoever would be first among you must be your slave. And, really giving of yourself to be blessed, like Matt McPherson told Don, with whatever you have, the best way to be blessed is be a blessing to someone else. And my life has just taken so many turns since truly living that. I was raised in the church. My dad's a minister, and, I never had one of those stories of, having a rough childhood or coming from a bad home. I was raised in church and have been very fortunate to be around a Christian home, meet a Christian wife, have very good kids. But, your life really takes a turn when you just simply just turn it over to Him. And in the last probably 7-8 years, man, have we just been so blessed with our personal lives, but also the reward of being able to serve others. It's just taken on a whole new level of happiness for our family.
When I was thinking as you were talking about, being a servant, the one thing, and I can admit it now, I don't know that I saw it, I don't know how long, 10, 15, 5 years ago, I don't know. But I think you were mentioning about young guys and that kind of a thing, the competition and competitiveness. There's that side of us, even when you've seen it at game dinners, guys showing pictures of their deer, guys are bringing in their racks, who's got the biggest, they're going to get the prize for all this. And guys, excuse me, we begin to try to one-up each other. I remember I had a deer like that one time. I passed on that. It's like really? You're going to try to play that game with me now to say, yeah, that's below me or whatever. Whatever that thing is that we want to try to one-up somebody, it comes back. I think as I've gotten older, and I'm really thankful for this because sometimes you can be embarrassed that maybe at one of those times in my life that I was that guy. I don't want to be that guy anymore. And God has been cleaning me of that stuff because that competitive spirit, you finally get to the place where you don't need to talk about yourself anymore. You can celebrate somebody else's, victories. You can walk with them in their pain without having to go autobiographical and tell them your story to try to relate. You can actually show, And that's one of the things when I heard you talking about this whole thing with Lester's Feet and the whole thing in Cincinnati and the family and how you've been doing everything. I told my wife this right off the bat. I said, I never had a conversation with Terry until that conversation. I said, it blew me away. I mean, I don't care whether you promote the company. Yeah, that's great. But we just really want to see you, come alongside and maybe tell people about this, how they can help others who really are in need. So I want to move into, since we're kind of in this genre, I mean, I wasn't planning on starting this way, but I trust God's leading. You just had a major change in your life after 28 years?
28 years in the corporate world. We made a big pivot with my family, and wow, what a roller coaster the last year has been. That's I don't even know how to explain it. I've never cried, laughed, and confided in telling my wife feelings in all of my life. Men are just so stubborn when it comes to emotions that over the last 4 months, I feel like I'm a whoop pup. I'll be the first to admit it.
Welcome to the club.
I guess to give some context to the listeners who haven't listened to Chasing Giants. I've felt a lot of anxiety about things at home, and I'm so blessed to have such a wonderful wife. But my wife is the oldest of 4 kids, and her parents went through a little bit of a tough time with a divorce after my wife and I had gotten married, but it was right as the youngest child had left to go out to college. And my wife was at the age, we were already established, had our careers, but she was kind of in the middle of a lot of it, being the oldest. And as my kids got older, I never realized kind of the toll that I think that experience took on my wife. And I think that looking back in my early years, I was a pretty good dad. I was able to always navigate to be in my kids' lives. I coached fast pitch softball for 21 years, was always engaged and at my kids' event. I wasn't an MIA dad, but when I wasn't with my kids, I wasn't a very good husband, meaning I was focused on my career then, or, back then I was justifying it as I'm providing for my family with income so they can, men are about providing and protecting, right? So I would hide behind that. And I really think that, through the different seasons of my marriage, I didn't do a very good job in making sure I recognized what the needs of my wife was. And I just felt this burden probably about a year ago where, my youngest is a junior in high school. My middle child is a senior in high school. And my oldest is actually engaged. She's getting married in June. That my wife had devoted so much of her life, even though she has a very, successful professional career as an accountant, she devoted so much to those kids. And I think she was really worried about being lost once she went off to college, similar to what happened with her parents. And this weight of I'm pushing for my career. I've worked for 28 years to be in a position in executive management at a large corporation. What's going to happen at the time my youngest kid leaves off to go to college, and me being on the road 80% of the time, traveling internationally, the stress and all of that stuff combined. When I am home, I'm not really home. It was just weighing on me. And it's like, how can I go to my employer and say, hey, I need to back off to take care of my house? I have to protect my home turf here, but yet not give up everything I've worked for. And I really just didn't know where that was going to end up, but you could just feel the burden and the weight of that. And
how long did you feel that, Terry? How long was that, like that process that you started being stirred?
It started really hitting me about the beginning of the year in 23, because that's when my wife started navigating her career, and she started, I don't listen very well. Good grief, I'm a man. It's like somebody could hit you upside the head and you still not understand it. But she started making some comments about how she wanted to do a career change. She wasn't happy because she needed something to keep her mind off the kids being gone. As my youngest daughter and middle son were, closing out their time in high school. So I started picking up on that, pretty much about a year ago. And she ended up making a career change and found this opportunity to go work for a faith-based company that is just it's a small business, about 50 people, but just the greatest ownership team you could ever imagine. That is just a very solid Christian family. And I could see that was just such a relief to her, but it's like, wait a second, what am I doing to help this as a husband? I'm so worried about providing and protecting for my family. She's always been supportive of me as I've, chased this pursuit of mature whitetails and working a little bit in the outdoor industry while I'm having a full-time job in corporate America. What am I doing about it? And it's just, that anxiety, every man feels it in a different way. I believe 100%. It's just that weight on your shoulders is what do I need to do? But heaven forbid we ever talk about emotions. We can't bring ourselves to do that. At least I can't. Maybe others can. But I tell you, there was this situation in July of this year where I don't have a lot. Like I said, my dad was a minister. We didn't have money growing up. We've never been very frivolous with, material things. When I grew up, you lived off your integrity and your honor. That's what you had to your name. That meant something to my family. And that was questioned in a corporate environment. And it really just, it hit me the wrong way. And it's like, I've worked 28 years with this company. I'm only 47 years old and I've been there 28 years. And now I'm going to be questioned about my character. You can call me an idiot from Kentucky all you want and that I made bad decisions, but to question me on that when I've tried so hard to, live as a true servant leader, both personally and professionally, I just literally tried to take the bull by the horns and said, how can I kind of steer my life to retire early? And it's how can I look for ways in the outdoor industry, leverage Chasing Giants, our land consulting businesses, to basically say, here in another year, I got enough revenue coming in other places that I can walk away from corporate America. And I'm so glad God just put a pause on things and let me calm down a little bit, because I think sometimes as men, we kind of go off the rails a little bit too fast with emotional decisions. But boy, did God have a big turn for me. So as I was navigating, the second YouTube channel, and we were repositioning the podcast and setting up for another consulting season with another business venture that Don and Higgins and I have, somebody that listens to the podcast said, hey, you all have this platform. What about doing a simple prayer time for the community every week? And I thought, man, I actually felt ashamed a little bit. It's here I've made this about me and trying to take care of what I thought was my problem, when God's sitting there giving you a platform that you could do so much more with other than worry about yourself. And the idea of Sunday night prayer time came about, and we went out and asked some of the very respected Christians that are in the industry if they'd be willing to do it, and all of them are on board. So every week there's another contributor from the outdoor industry that gets on there and just gives a few thoughts and prays for them. So that kind of took off, and I'm like, oh, well, this is really cool. And then God just completely blindsided me when that same company that hired my wife as the accounting controller approached me about coming and running that whole organization this year. And, it's an equipment dealership that sells everything from zero turns to tractors to big construction equipment and industrial supplies. But I won't bore you with the details except for one thing, and that is through that process of saying, am I doing the right thing for my family? When I met with the founder, we had lunch at an Applebee's type restaurant. And before we could even order our drinks, he puts his menu down and he looks at me and he says, I want to make one thing clear with what my expectations of you are. And I'm like, oh boy, here he is going to tell me I want a certain return on my investment, or I want you to do this.
Right.
The first things out of his mouth was, my expectation for you is you are going to minister to our employees and to our community through this job. The business takes care of itself. And I thought, well, this is where I need to be.
Yep.
So after 28 years leaving the corporate world and running a 50-person company, it's been a whirlwind through what normally is a time I'm hunting a lot. So there hasn't been a lot of hunting.
Yeah, I got two questions. And the one we can say, one was, how's your season been so far? But I think I probably know from everything that's happening. And the other one was, so to have been somewhere 28 years,
mm-hmm.
and, that whole thing, we all understand when someone questions our integrity, it feels like we're being disrespected. And
mm-hmm.
that's, for men, that's most men's, like one of their probably top 2 or 3 needs.
Right.
There's the lack of purpose. I think I talked about that in my last book. But that need for respect, or lack of respect or disrespect is number 2. And at that point, you're kind of like, is it worth pouring myself into something where you don't feel, significant, valued,
right.
Questioned? And God has that way. And it's hard because he doesn't do it quick sometimes, because sometimes he'll just drop it in your lap, and sometimes you're going, God, are you seeing what's going on here? You know where my heart is. You know where I want to be. You know what my passion is. But God has something else always going on. It says, hey, I know I'm going to be working these things out for the betterment of everything that you're going to be doing, because these things need to happen before I open that door for you. And it's that staying patient. So my question with that would be, when you think back over those 28 years, and to be able to get to that point where with that quick, turning something around, stepping totally away from it, what are some trust builders that you saw increase your faith during that time that you could go, you know what, God, I trust you. I know you got this.
Number one was swallowing my pride and actually having that hard conversation with my wife. Well, I could go down a rabbit hole with this, but to try to make it short, growing up as a preacher's kid, for those of you people who are listening that might be a PK, it's such a blessing, and it's such a hindrance to your personal faith, because at the dinner table every day, your dad's talking about his job, not where you go to become better spiritually. The church becomes your family's place of employment when you're a preacher's kid. And it's really hard, and it's taken a lot of years for me to accept the fact that I need to treat church as not my dad's employer. So I was very cognizant of that. So I never talked about work at home. My wife knew where I worked. She knew what I did. But when I got home, there was no discussion about work. And I think the healthy thing that happened through this is I really got to sit down and open up to my wife. And I think the trust that it built between us, not only was I willing to put that career aside to where this opportunity allowed me to work alongside my wife, but not travel and show my commitment to our marriage. I think that was very healthy for both of us, but also gave me some reassurance that this isn't a selfish move. This is a move for my family. The second thing is that I've been blessed with very good mentors through my life, and especially in my professional career. And even though I had that bad situation where that guy questioned my integrity and my honor, there was still a core of people there that truly cared about me and my family. And I don't want to make this out to be a martyr situation, because it's really not. The new job that I took, it was a raise, it was a promotion, it checked all the boxes. I mean, very rarely do you get to promote your career without sacrificing your family. Most of the time you're giving up something at home to take a new opportunity. In this case, it didn't. And those people at work that truly had the value of our relationship in the forefront versus the obligation of being an employee there, they supported me 100%. But I think at the end of the day, the whole exercise really gave me a new value that communicating with my wife and us being on the same page was probably the most valuable thing in it. Whether I stay here, 2 years, 5 years, or even retire at this company, our marriage is stronger today than what it was 3 months ago when I started considering this move. And I think that's the biggest blessing out of all of it.
I think one of the things that I'm taking away from you, which is hitting me right between the eyes, to be honest with you, is when you think about your marriage and your family and those pinnings or pingings, I'm trying to think what the word is, that you begin to feel, do I need to be looking at doing something different? I think one of the things that God has, every now and then he'll bring me back to it, and he'll say, are you willing to do something different if your family needs it? Or if I call you to do something different, are you so set in your ways? What are you willing to do? And I think for me, God is bringing me back to that place too. Brent, do you have a willing spirit? Your marriage has to come before everything else, because that's your integrity, that's your legs. And I appreciate you being willing to do something different, to love, your wife and your family. And
yeah, I hope we're going to talk about deer hunting hopefully a little bit, but before we transition to that, there's a big thing that I really focused on, and that is Ephesians chapter 4. And, I sit back and look at great halftime speeches. Think about a halftime speech. A coach walks into a locker room, since I was a coach for so many years. You go in, you assess the first half of that game, right? Yep. Here's where we're at. This is what we're going to do. And Ephesians chapter 4, verse 1 is like the ultimate halftime speech, if people really look at it a certain way. The first 3 chapters of Ephesians are setting up this beautiful description of the grace that we have through Jesus and the salvation that we have through him, right? It's just this beautiful depiction of if we follow Christ and we do the right things, eternity, not just what humans don't understand eternity, but eternity at the feet of Jesus is what's there for us, and we can be assured in that salvation. But Paul, as he's sitting in a jail cell, in a Roman jail cell, he starts off chapter 4, verse 1, stating, and I'm going to mess this up, but off the top of my head, it says, I therefore, a prisoner of the Lord, urge you. And what I started really taking about that is Paul never said, I'm in prison by the Roman Empire, so I can't help. But since I'm here and you're there, this is what you should do, bark orders. The ultimate halftime speech to assess the situation in your life, in your career, in your hunting season is the first 3 chapters are, here's where we're at. Where are you at in your life? Where are you at with what you're doing? Where are you at with your career? Now, what are you going to do with it? If Paul was ever going to make an excuse about what he could and couldn't do, it would have been chapter 4, verse 1. But instead, he doesn't even admit he's a prisoner of the Roman Empire. He's a prisoner of the Lord, and says this is what we're going to do together to continue the mission of spreading the word of Christ. And I started really looking at that, and it's like, okay, I have this platform that because of Don with this following, I have the foundation that's helping hundreds of families. God has put me in a position that so many people don't have the opportunity of being in. What am I going to do with it? Am I going to stay in corrupt corporate America, or am I going to go to a company to work alongside my wife, to focus on my marriage? It's what are you going to do with it? It's the ultimate halftime speech. And the second half so far, since I started my new job on October 15th, it's been an absolute whirlwind. I'm drinking by a fire hose trying to learn a new business. But yeah. I tell you what, looking at the last Wild Game Dinner that I spoke on Ephesians chapter 4. And it's like everybody's at a point in their life where you can look and relate the book of Ephesians to your life and say, this is where we're at. This is the picture painted. You have the opportunity to use whatever's in your life. Now, what are you going to do with it? Are you going to make an excuse and say, well, the neighbors shot that deer. If I don't shoot it, the neighbors will. Or I can't raise bucks like that on my property. Are you going to make an excuse, or are you going to do like Paul did and really just set it up and say, hey, let's focus on the priority here and what we're going to do, and go out there and do it. Yep. And Ephesians chapter 4 has been just a huge part of my life for about the last 5 months.
You know, as you were talking about this, I was thinking about Ephesians 5. It came to my mind, and I didn't have my Bible with me, so I grabbed my phone real quick. And this is actually the paraphrase, the MSG, the Eugene Peterson, but it starts off in Ephesians 5. It says, watch what God does, and then you do it, like children who learn proper behavior from their parents. Mostly what God does is love you. Keep company with him and learn a life of love. Observe how Christ loved us. Now, here's what I wanted to get to. His love was not cautious, but extravagant. He didn't love, and here it is, in order to get something from us, but to give everything of himself to us. And then he says, love like that. And I keep coming back to Lester's feet and what you guys are doing with that. When we keep company with God and what Christ did for us and what he's done in us and through us, when we keep company like that, it begins to transform us from the inside out. It's that whole new identity. We realize I don't have to one-up somebody. I don't have to make the big money or have the big title. If God calls me to go do something, how awesome is it he's called me to go love like that? And I just want to say again, man, what you guys are doing with Lester's Feed and what you're doing with the podcast and everything you guys are doing, I'm so grateful to see guys like you out there in the industry. So let's left turn, Clyde. And what we usually do in the podcast, this is different because usually we go from the wilds. I was saying to the wilds, and then we go into a story at the end, right?
Yeah.
So we're kind of doing it backwards. So now the guys have gotten this far. For you guys that have survived so far, I should say survived, the first couple of deer, months right now, and you're like, man, I didn't fill my freezer. We're coming into late season now. You've got the less known about, less talked about second rut, colder temperatures, not as much food. And that's what I wanted to kind of just pick your brain, because this is where you guys really shine with stuff. Talk to some of these guys that are going to be out there, what you would be doing, what you've been doing all year to prepare for this time.
Well, obviously, diversification of your food sources is a key. And for those people who manage properties and put nutrition programs out or can feed, that's going to be the pivotal thing as we approach late season. Now, there's a lot of controversy and different opinions based on the second rut versus a first rut. And I think I have a little bit different opinion of it. It's as the likelihood, research shows us that even does with twins that are pregnant with twins, a very high percentage of those twins have a different father. So most deer hunters don't understand that. So a doe that's pregnant with twins, a very high percentage of those twins will have a different father. That's how much those does are being bred during the rut. Okay, so that puts a little bit into perspective. So I think what happens is as we come out what's called the secondary rut, these bucks are still at this fever pitch, and they're covering so much more ground during daylight hours trying to find the next doe that's not been bred yet. So that's why they always say that Thanksgiving weekend is such a great time to kill a giant, because they're coming out of lockdown and they're going into what people kind of call the second rut. And it's just the bucks are spending so much more time that the next doe is harder to find, if you will. Okay. Now, what I do think that there hasn't been a lot of people talk about in the outdoor industry is research shows us that fawns, when they reach a certain weight, God's creation is just so extraordinary. When they reach a certain weight, they go into cycle for the first time and can be bred. So a lot of times what people think is, okay, every 30 days those does come into cycle. Well, I think a lot of times when we see does being chased in December, January, even February, it's those first year fawns, the does are getting at enough weight to where they become in heat. Okay. Now, I think that the drought across the U.S., especially the Midwest, had the nutrition so pulled back because of lack of crops. Now, luckily, we did have a huge acorn crop for most of the Midwest. I think that we're going to see a little bit more rutting activity possibly later in the year because those first year fawns, those does were not able to build up as much weight through the summer and fall as what they would normally do. So I think it's all going to be about food and the right place at the right time. We get a lot into the science side of it, and I don't want to bog down this podcast with that. They can go over to the Chasing Giants if they want to hear this, but I think there's still an opportunity. We had that weekend before Thanksgiving where we had rising pressure and lower temperatures, and there was a ton of big deer killed the weekend before Thanksgiving. So I think that the opportunity with cold weather coming in, the colder it gets and the more diverse food you have, the better chances you have. If not, you're going to be in that luck of the draw. Are you in the right place when those doe fawns get heavy enough, weight meaning heavy, that they come into cycle and you have bucks out chasing them around? Otherwise, it's going to be about food in late season.
Yep. Dr. Dave Samuel? Do you know that name?
I do.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
It was so neat. I haven't seen him in years. I got to be there when he was inducted into the Hall of Fame. He and Chuck Adams that night, and we were talking about this, and he was saying something too with the acorn crop being so vital because weight has so much to do with healthy does.
Protein and fat.
Yep.
Protein and fat.
Well, what we're
the late season's going to be pivotal for a lot of hunters that aren't. But the big thing is, if you can find food, set up on food, your evening hunts are the colder it gets, the better the hunting's going to get.
And I saw you had the perfect wind the whole month. Was it September or whatever it was at your place? It was an east wind.
What was that now?
I was watching one of the podcasts with you, and you were talking about hadn't been able to hunt in quite a while because all you were getting was an east wind on your property.
We had a lot of east winds this year.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is, and I'm not set up at that farm for many east wind hunting locations. I think this year I have 2 7-year-olds that need to be shot. I just haven't had time to hunt them, but they're not big enough. I need another 150 deer on my wall, like a hole in the head.
Yeah.
So I'm not. If I would have had a giant to chase this year while doing this job change, I might have had a little bit more aggravation and anxiety.
Well, maybe it worked out the way it did for a reason.
Maybe it did. Yeah. But we still have a couple deer in Illinois that I'm really wanting to try to hunt more. I did go up for about a 6 days straight. And I saw 12 bucks between 135 and 145. So I don't have one lick to complain about. It's just everybody in the hunting woods is on their own journey with what their goals are.
Yep.
And, if it's part of a management plan that we need to take out an older buck that's 130, 140 inch deer, I'm 100% for it. But to just randomly go to a permission property out of state, I'm just not there in my journey personally yet. Don't have a problem with what anybody else does, but
now you talked about the industry a little bit ago. I was going to ask you a question. Are you doing the ATA show this year? Will you be there?
If I go, it will be to network and meet with some of the people like you that we sponsor. But I'm from the real world. But Chasing Giants or Real World will not have a booth at ATA.
I was going to say, I didn't see him last year at Indianapolis.
No.
Yeah. Because usually I try to get lunch together.
For probably 3 years.
Yeah, I was going to say, last time we had lunch was probably 3 years ago.
But I'll be honest with you, as Real World's brand continues to grow in the outdoor industry, we have a very limited number of people that we partner with for marketing collateral. But the rest of our marketing dollars are going to basically outreach ministries like yours. We're going to be, there's a gentleman that we've gotten to know that's done some collateral for us in the recent years, but he's recently been led to quit his job, go back to seminary, and go to the mission field. So we're not even going to disclose it, but I'll just tell people, part of what we would normally 10 years ago pay a pro staff to do social media posts, we're going to be giving that to a guy monthly to help his family pay bills while he's in the seminary getting ready to go to the mission field.
That's awesome.
That's why we're spending our marketing dollars. And I tell you what, I can't from a business standpoint put an ROI against that investment. But I think our business and everything is being blessed so much more by putting our dollars into true ministry opportunities than just another, guys wanting to, have a YouTube channel.
And guys, if you're listening to this today, I hope what you're really hearing is this, that you can't outgive God. When God calls you to do something, listen, he's got those breadcrumbs he's putting down in front of you. There's a purpose behind it. And there's nothing more satisfying when we see God at work and we know he's put those breadcrumbs down because we know his voice. He's done it just for us. How incredible is that, to think that the God that made everything there is, even down to the minute details, knows exactly how you're wired. He made you. And he's got a plan for your life. You're hearing Terry talk about it today, to step away from a corporate job and follow the leading that he was feeling from God. Man, I needed to hear that message today because I'm in that place. God, I want to trust you. I want to know that when you're moving me, that I want to have a willing spirit that says, I've seen you do it before and I know I'm going to see you do it again, and I'm going to give you the glory when you do it, because there's nothing more important than my relationship with you and with my family. Terry, man, thank you for being with us today. And for you listeners that are a part of Unleash Plus, we're going to carry on this conversation for a few more minutes. But thanks again for joining us. And remember, guys, we are the resistance. We'll see you next time.